So we'll start the recording. Thank you very much to join us today for this webinar organized by the EU-funded project Decarb City Pipes. So our webinars today is about mobilization toward phasing out fossil fuels in general in buildings. My name is Julien Joubert. I'm working for Energy Cities. We are a European network of cities supporting cities in decarbonizing their economies. And I'm happy to be the moderator today about this webinar. So first, a few words about Decarb City Pipe. It's an EU project aiming at showing how cities can decarbonize space heating and hot water system. And 7 cities engaged in this project developed different scenarios to decarbonize their heating sectors with 3 different steps. First, setting up a vision for a decarbonization of energy supply and demand, then transform this vision into spatial plans, and third, having transition roadmap explaining the different steps to achieve this decarbonization. So this project is coming to the end, and we are really happy to share some learnings and outcome today with you. This project and the learning can also be a source of inspiration for other local authority willing to do heat planning, and especially more and more local authorities are going to do that. Some started voluntarily, like the one of involved in this project, but also the new energy efficiency directive is going to set an obligation for local authorities of more than 45,000 inhabitants to do heat planning. Quite interestingly, the new energy efficiency directive also asks member states to provide support, financial and technical support, to the utmost extent possible to local authorities to perform this work. And at Energy Cities, we have published an analysis on the legal and support framework that local authorities can have already today to do this local heating and cooling planning. We identify some gaps, but also best practice and recommendation so that member states can set better framework to support local authorities. So more and more local authorities going to do heat planning, and we want to share this inside of this project with you today. We are going to focus more on the mobilization of stakeholders and also instruments that local authorities can use, especially planning instruments to move forward their transition. Today, I'm very pleased to have with us 2 speakers. First, Elisa Korskamper, who is postdoctoral researcher at Utrecht University, who is going to give us an overview also of the learning from the 6 different cities who developed transition roadmap, presenting their starting point and also what they set up in their transition roadmap. We'll have an exchange, so please prepare your question. We'll have a bit of time, so we are not so many, so we could have a nice exchange. And then we'll move to a deep dive to the situation of Vienna and how Vienna developed its strategy, how it's engaged a large number of stakeholders in setting up their out-of-gas strategy. And to present this, I'm really happy to have with us today Peter Lichtenbohrer, who is spatial and energy planner at the city of Vienna. And after his short presentation as well, we'll have time for exchange. So thank you everyone to join, and I'm giving the floor directly to Elisa for the first presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just have to share my screen for a moment. Okay, can you all see the screen now?
Yes, perfect.
Nice. Yeah, thank you very much for this introduction, Julia. I'm Elisa Koskamper. I'm working at Utrecht University together with Professor Dr. Jochen Mondstadt, who is also in this webinar today. And together with Urban Innovation Vienna and also master students that we have, we developed city reports on all of the 7 cities, and based on these reports and now the transition roadmaps, we gathering first lessons from the heating and cooling transitions of the decarb cities. So it's going to be a mix basically between 6 and 7 cities all the time. But just for the beginning, the good thing is that Julia already told you important things about the heating and cooling transition in Europe and also the decarb city project. So I will actually not repeat all of that. I mean, the only thing that you would have to know is that the heating and cooling sector has a large potential for decarbonisation of the energy sector. And what is also important in the heating and cooling sector, just to know for later on, is that, of course, cities play a major role in it. And heating and cooling is not only a technical dimension, it's also an economic and political, social dimension, because for district heating systems, which are one major infrastructure to decarbonize the heating sector, very high upfront investments are necessary, and also long payback times, for example. So this is very important, just to know that there are several path dependencies which can be created in the sector. I also will not go into detail on the decarb project, because as you already heard, our cities, they are in different stages of the heating and cooling transition, and also applied a similar approach in the decarb project to advance the heating and cooling transition. But what is more interesting and important are our results. So I will already come to that, because what we did in these city reports and also currently is comparing like all the framework conditions of the cities first, and then what they plan to do for the transition. So first here some like the general context of our cities, where you can see that cities are quite different. For example, the urban climate is quite different. We have in Vienna and Bratislava, we have continental climate with hot summers, cold winters. We do have milder climates in other of our cities. Also inhabitants, like in terms of size, the cities vary substantially, with Winterthur being the smallest city and Vienna the largest. And what is also important is that we have very different production structures for heating. For example, several cities have like a publicly owned municipal utility, which is the heat providing company. Other of our cities have private companies, or like a mixed with public-private companies, which is also important for the transition. Then if we look at the current energy mix of our cities, you see pretty much a dominance of gas boilers, and also oil boilers are also important. So it's the heating is mainly fossil fuel based. Some of our cities already count with a district heating network. Some of them not. Bilbao has not, is just starting, and also Dublin is just a minimal one in place. But what is important to mention is that these district heating networks are still based on fossil fuels, mainly natural gas. So, and finally, also what is important is the institutional and policy framework. Here we have, for example, just in 2 of our cities, or better said, 2 of our cities are in countries which have current federal legislation, or better said, like national legislation that actually is directly targeting the heating and cooling sector, and is mandating timeframes for the decarbonisation. It's also important that this legislation just came into, just was decided on this year and is not even in place yet. So they're the first one starting out, and in all the other countries, there's legislation supporting the heating and cooling transition, but not with clear regulations, for example. And so here in this slide, we already see first the current status and also parts of the transition, the planned transition, because we have first of all the current and projecting heating demand, which you will see is projected to decrease in all of our cities, and also the cooling demand, which is projected to increase in all of the cities. And what is very important is the refurbishment rate, because this is actually relates to energy efficiency, which is a major point in the heating and cooling transition. And there you see that in all of our cities, the refurbishment rate is currently around 1%, but it's also projected to increase in some cities, not as high, for example, in Winterthur, but in some cities, for example, Bilbao, quite substantially. And now when we come to the planned energy mix in the cities, you see that, now the largest part is red, which is the district heating. And this is, in the majority of cities, that's planned to be the main infrastructure and decarbonized infrastructure. That's also true for Winterthur and for Bratislava. We just didn't have exact numbers. And also, as you can see, electric heating also plays an important role, especially in Bilbao. That's mainly heating via heat pumps, individualized and centralized ones. And now coming to the district heating system again, because as I said, this is the infrastructure for decarbonized energy sources, doesn't mean that it has to be heated like this. And so our cities also plan for which energy sources they are going to use in the district heating system. In what is just important, I didn't mention this yet, here these are always the targets that our cities have for decarbonization and climate neutrality goals. So we have in all of the cities mainly waste heat from mainly industrial and also commercial sources plays a major role. Also geothermal energy, especially in Munich, and biomass is also an important point. And as we saw also in Bilbao, also for the district heating, probably electricity. But here we come already to the first challenges in the heating and cooling transition, which are actually in different dimensions. As I told you before, the heating and cooling sector is not only or can not only be looked at as a technical system, but also different, a multi-dimensional system. So here we have the first dimension, which is the physical, technical, and built environment. And with first what we see, these renewable energy sources are tricky because some of them actually go against broader sustainability goals and also principles of circular economy. That's, for example, especially the point with waste incineration, because actually waste is planned to decrease under principle of circular economy, and also not all waste waste is fossil free, and just a certain part or certain share is renewable. And also biomass is complicated because biomass frequently means wood. So this is also quite tricky for sustainability goals. Then a next point is that actually also a conflicting area is climate mitigation and adaptation to a certain degree, because for district heating networks, this is construction in the streets. You have to open the streets and close them again. And so especially right now, since it's very urgent to do that, if district heating networks are going to be constructed or extended, it's quite complicated to still integrate climate mitigation and adaptation measures in the streets, for example, urban greening, or also improved bicycle networks, or bicycle infrastructure. Because once the street is opened and closed, it's quite unrealistic that this is going to happen very soon again. Also, another problem is electricity as an energy source, because this goes potentially, or this conflicts potentially in the future with other policy and economic areas such as digitalization and e-mobility. And finally, a quite different point is that for district heating, in general, there's still skilled labor force missing, and so a lot of capacity building is necessary. Then I also come to the challenges, like these are the two other and final dimensions. Here for the heating, cooling sector, we have the institutional and policy environment. As you already saw before, we have a quite disconnected multi-level governance system in the sense of that there are federal laws missing and only in place right now in 2 of the countries of the cities. And so this creates a huge regulatory gap, or even ambiguity, because, for example, in the Netherlands, the new climate or the draft new climate law, which is not discussed or in place yet, it's being still discussed, would imply that heating companies have to be public and not private, cannot be private anymore. But as we saw before, there are a lot of heating companies are private or public-private. So this would, mean a huge change. And so right now, for example, the entire heating transition is just on a hold because of this ambiguity created by the discussed law. And finally, what we see in all of our cities and at the different levels, regional, national level, funding is not secured yet, or it is not clear yet for the district heating networks. And as we saw before, they need a lot of or very high investment costs. So this creates, of course, a lot of uncertainty. And finally, like in the social, economic, and political environment, we have the problem with, especially with, again, like the district heating networks, we have even a kind of a collective action problem, because you need to create an efficient, cost-efficient district heating network, and also, in general, efficient heating network, district heating network, a certain amount of connections. So, of households, many households have to connect, or as more households that connect, the better. But currently, especially also because of the unregulated climate of our environment of the heating and cooling transition, actually district heating networks are in competition with individual heating options such as heat pumps. So this also creates even new uncertainties, and social acceptance of district heating networks, for example, would be quite important. But as we also saw, the political climate is quite difficult. As we could see during this year, during discussions and debates on the climate law, for example, the new legislation for the heating and cooling sector in Germany, but also in the Netherlands. So again, like even this institutional policy environment is quite important for the transition. But now comes finally like more the good news. How are our cities navigating these challenges, or what policy instruments have been used and will be used in the future, or are planned to be used in the future? And here we see clearly that spatial energy planning is on the map now. It's done by all of our cities, and was mainly introduced into the heating and cooling sector. And this is something which did not exist like that before. Also, all of our cities, they are now gathering data that they did not gather before. And it's just on the map, this policy instrument. Also, in some of the cities, for example, Munich, Rotterdam, Vienna, they are employing a participatory neighborhood approach to get the social acceptance of the district heating networks. And we also have important policy instruments, for example, in the form of institution building. This happened in Bilbao. The city installed a new energy agency, and also Bratislava is planning to do the same with the example of Bilbao in mind, because in Bilbao, for example, we had not much, it was just very new for the city, the entire this entire planning, and especially around district heating networks, which we saw that they don't have one yet. And also in general, this whole sector was quite, not as explored yet in terms of capacities. So they, did this institution building. And also finally, we have also other important instruments, but also in 2 cities, we had, for example, the acceleration of or an administrative process in Winterthur to make implementation faster, or also in Munich, they plan it for the procurement process also to advance the entire transition. So, I mean, in the end, we can see that, again, like the heating and cooling sector has several dimensions, which has several challenges. It's, again, not only technical or economic challenges that our cities face, but they all employed and will apply policy instruments which can potentially mitigate these challenges and try to navigate those. And as we saw, especially this spatial energy planning got quite important now through the heating cooling transition and in our project. But what we can also say in the end is that, of course, like this institutional and policy environment and also the social and economic environment, they are quite difficult to navigate through these policy instruments alone. And still, like this regulatory gap, also what was mentioned before in the beginning of the session by Julia, it plays a very important role. And we also have to say that, for example, EU regulations currently, they give targets, they give goals, but they have not so much procedure provisions for member states or also for cities. It's all quite left to them and quite flexible. But even common methodologies, for example, are missing for data gathering, or at least like in our cities, they all came up with different methodologies for data gathering. So there's a huge potential to still support the heating and cooling transition. With common instruments and common methodologies. Because finally, as I said, like this institutional and policy environment is also impacting a lot the social, especially the social and political environment, also the economic one, especially seeing which production structure is in place in which country. But as we see also, like the acceptance of the heating cooling transition is very dependent and on this regulatory gap, which could still improve a lot. So I'm in the end. Thank you very much. And
thank you very much, Elisa, for this presentation and the different aspect underlined about the situation of the different cities, but also the challenge they faced. So we are going to take a few questions or comments also. If you want to ask a question, you can use the chat, but you can also raise your hand and mute yourself. Maybe, I mean, we are not so many, so it's better if you ask a question orally. Yes, Peter, first.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to add something because you mentioned the competition between district heating and heat pumps. In Vienna, we have also this discussion going on, but we see that in certain areas, and I think many cities have the same issue, there is almost only district heating possible, because if you apply heat pumps in very dense areas, you have the noise complaining and everything. So this is something that we see as well, and it's a very interesting discussion, this depending on the spatial aspect and the location where you are in terms of planning. That's just what I wanted to add as a comment.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, that's a very important comment, because as you said, it's not possible everywhere. Here, for example, like in Germany, for example, there's also a huge discussion if when there's not so much densities in municipalities, if there should not be regulations that, for example, in a district heating, or in the area of a planned district heating system, if their heat pumps should be actually not allowed, or like subsidies should be limited for that. But it's just, the discussion is just starting, for example.
Yeah, the same. That's perfect. Yeah, we're also thinking, or there's a discussion about funding, spatially related funding, because you don't want to reduce the demand in district heating areas because it's not cost effective anymore. So these are all discussions going on. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Peter. Sanjay?
Thank you. Thanks for an interesting overview, Lisa. My main question is around the different types of funding and business models the different cities are applying. So you have a couple of examples of Stadtwerkes, which are locally owned, publicly owned energy companies, but you also have others which are not. So can you tell us about whether they're using the same type of business model, or what are the innovations, or how are they getting finance in order to do both the planning but also the investments in the system? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for this question. It's actually the most complicated question because, as I said, the financing is not as secure in all of the cities or not clear yet. I mean, I hope maybe, Peter, you can also then tell it for Vienna. I don't know, because I have really, limited information on that also. I mean, for example, for the in the cities where there are private companies, we have right now more, business models are based on smaller networks, I would say. I really hope that I'm not providing not correct information, but for example, in Dublin, they are planning like different district heating networks and smaller ones, and they are actually planning low temperature networks, which can use the heat from data centers, because they have like the largest amount of IT data centers there in comparison, the European Union. So there's also, I think, already possible to plan, because they have the heat available, let's put it like this, if they build the system and also have retrofitting in the buildings. But it's still complicated to know. I mean, the heat sources are still a bit the problem, to know which heat source you would use for in which city, let's put it like this. So it's complicated to make already viable business models.
Maybe a link to, yes, Sanjay.
No, I was just going to build on that one. I mean, the kind of experience that we're seeing. So I'm from the European Geothermal Energy Council. I should have said that from the start. Apologies. So one of the things that we're seeing with the kind of rollout of geothermal, where you actually have to build the energy source, which is the question, the point that you finished on, that actually there's a tendency to look towards kind of some form of public-private partnership in the kind of the heat purchase agreement space. I was quite keen to see if, from what we've heard though, is that some local authorities are used to these kind of systems in some countries, and therefore they're more acceptable. But we're finding that in certain other places that there's a degree of skepticism around those. So I was quite curious to know if that's also reflected in the experiences that you've seen. Sorry for interrupting you.
No, it was not an interruption. Thanks for complimenting. I think my point, I mean, related to what you mentioned, I think a important point in this discussion that you're bringing is a question of the trust and transparency, and we see it also in the Netherlands. Like, I mean, it's not necessarily an issue in a way like, of course, we need private investor and private companies, but what is how is it regulated? Is it bringing enough transparency and trust for consumer and for local authorities as well? That's a key issue, but also all the discussion in the Netherlands regarding kind of making district heating company like semi-public, because as soon as we start to ask everyone to connect, and it's more a collective choice, then it needs to be a lot of let's say control in a way.
And just the last point I want to add very briefly is, I mean, of course, also for the private actors, it's quite complicated to plan now, because there are so many uncertainties. So this is also complicating, of course, the entire point with them.
Well, but that's also the goal, one of the goals of the local heating and cooling plan, to bring more certainties to them, of course. Maybe we can move to the next question. Tomislav, if you can also present briefly yourself. Thanks.
Sure. So my name is Tomislav Nosel. I'm coming from the Northwest Croatia Regional Energy and Climate Agency. As you've probably guessed, it's from Croatia. My question is actually more on the side of implementation. So I was just wondering, once you have the plans in place, once you have decided, for instance, where you have your district heating zones within your plans, which areas are better suited for which type of technology, what mechanisms do you actually use to then enforce these plans? It's easy to do that for public buildings, which the city itself controls. But how do you sway private investors to do so? I know some mechanisms in Vienna, which does have the capacities of a state to pass laws, but not all cities do. So I was just wondering how is that issue tackled?
Yeah, thank you. again, quite complicated because the heat planning in the majority of our cities is not binding. So there you, of course, there you can do it and show the zones, but again, in the end, you need to, yeah, persuade people to connect to the district heating, which would be built. And there are, apart from, it's more like this, now what we see as strategies is more with a spatial rollout to try this, to go through different, well, to do a more experimental approach, to go through different neighborhoods and then spatially roll out the entire approach. But of course, it's also quite complicated as it's, yeah, since it's an infrastructure approach to have have enough certainty then. So again, it's quite, again, like this regulatory gap is quite limiting, I would say, for cities there.
If I can just connect to this, I mean, we're facing the same issues in Croatia. We're trying to move away from natural gas into more sustainable solutions like district heating or heat pumps or something like that. And we also have this issue that basically cities themselves have very limited capacities to actually mandate the implementation of their energy and climate plans. One approach that we've tried to use is to somewhat replicate Vienna's spatial energy planning, but integrate this with the city's own spatial plans, which are binding, which are enforcement mechanisms as well. And we are also experimenting by introducing limits on the use of fossil fuels or even mandates on the use of, for instance, district heating or other technologies directly through spatial planning processes. So this is something that you could also consider in the planning approach.
That's true. That's a very important comment. And I forgot, sorry, some of our cities also try to do the same, actually, like with Bilbao and Winterthur, to also get transition roadmap, yeah, through this integrated and voted on by city council, for example.
Yeah. This is something that would be quite interesting if we could also connect on this at a later date. I'll be highly interested to get more information on this and maybe also exchange our experiences.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tomislav. Next question from Michael.
Not really a question, but a comment on the business model question. There is no business model without regulation. You have to mandate a phase out of gas and oil. Then investing into district heating will become a business case. Without it, I think it's almost impossible. And this is not in the competence of the cities, and that's the problem. There is a business model for decarbonizing the district heating. Yes, it's the ETS. So utilities have to decarbonize their heavily gas or coal-based district heating production, but there is no business model for expanding the district heating systems into areas where you have a lot of gas heating systems, as long as they don't have to be phased out by building owners and tenants and whatever. That's exactly what's the case in Austria, since we don't have this renewable heat law that we are waiting for, that we have been waiting for 3 years. And now I don't know how it is going on. 600,000 people or 600,000 flats connected to gas don't have to leave the gas. So how to expand district heating systems, how to expand the heat pumps now without anybody having to. I mean, there are subsidies and there's etc. There's a political will, but there is no regulatory framework which ensures a business model. I mean, for example, the district heating company in Vienna would probably have to invest a couple of billion euros. Why should they invest if nobody has to connect to the district heating system? So business, and this is the same, by the way, because there was a discussion between private companies and city-owned companies. It's the same. It's one market. Even city-owned companies will not be able to invest a lot of money if nobody has to connect to.
Thanks, Michael, for the addition. Very quickly, Sanjay, in 1 minute, and then we move to the presentation of Peter to have also time for a question after the presentation, and we'll dig more in the case of Vienna.
Okay, I'll be super brief. We've, on the business model aspect, one of the things that's happening at the moment is the European Parliament has an own initiative report on geothermal. So it's not legislative, but we're testing out one of the core ideas, which is directly responding to Michael's point, where we're effectively adding an additional mandate onto distribution system operators, the people who run electricity and heat of often fossil-based heat networks. Maybe if I can share the text with you afterwards, it'd be good to get your views on this one, because this is how we see you can lock in and effectively provide a mandate to make it much easier to do the phase out. But I'll send that by email. Sorry for interrupting.
Sure, happy to get more info. Thanks. So let's move to the case of Vienna and how Vienna worked together with many stakeholders to have an ambitious transition roadmap for heating and cooling decarbonisation. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Perfect. Yes, thank you for the introduction, Julien. I'll give you some insights on the topic from Vienna. I'm working in the municipal department for energy planning, and today I will talk about the history and the path of phasing out gas and the steps that we take until 2040. Then I will present some insights from the strategic paper that has been published called Phasing Out Gas, Heating and Cooling Vienna 2040. Then I will have some slides about the implementation program within the city, so how we work together within the city. And in the end, I will just give some examples in the actual work and the working groups within this context. The path of phasing out gas, you can see here a slide where I wanted to show a little bit the history and what is up next until 2040. In 2020, the Viennese government declared that we want to be climate neutral by 2040. And right then we started a local working group. It's like a pre-phase to this phasing out gas strategy, which lasted about 2 years, where we worked together in different groups all across different departments within the city. From there, the Vienna Climate Guide was published in 2022 regarding all climate-related issues, from climate protection to climate adaptation. And also, that's what interesting also today is the phasing out gas strategy. And this year, it was published at the beginning of this year, dealing with all the technical issues, how we can actually phase out gas in the city. And parallel to that, the so-called implementation program was established at the executive office in Vienna, running in the first part from 2023 to 2025. And the big rollout is then planned from 2026 until 2040. So this is just a little introduction to how it was done in Vienna. We'll go more into details later. When we talk about phasing out gas, it's just important to know where we are standing today. Like other cities, we have a lot of emissions in the mobility sector, but also when you look at the left chart, in the building sector. We have the differentiation in Vienna mainly between decentral and centralized gas supply. That's why I also put in this graph on the right. As Michael, I think, said before, we have almost 500,000 decentralized gas boilers in Vienna. So this means a gas boiler in each apartment, in each apartment in the city. We just recently learned in another webinar that we have more decentralized gas boilers than entire Denmark, for instance. So it's quite a challenge within the city. And of course, we also have some centralized gas boilers. So the main challenge in Vienna is gas and not oil in this context. In order to know what we want to do, we've also classified the buildings in Vienna. We've developed so-called decarbonisation types. So knowing only that we have decentralized or central gas supplies was not enough. We found out, for instance, that we have more than 300,000 apartments in multi-story residential buildings that are not refurbished, that have a decentralized gas supply, for instance. This was necessary to really show how we can make it on a technical point of view, and of course also to have numbers behind it and know how much workforce we need, how much money we need to invest for each of these building types. This is just to show you our approach, which can also be found in the phasing out gas strategy. And another important aspect, as we heard today already, is also the spatial component of the transition. You can see on the right the heat demand densities within the city, and I've already mentioned that in central parts where you have a very dense built structure, you might only have the possibility to use district heating, whereas in the outskirts of the town, you might use other renewable solutions. And within the Decarb City project, we've developed a vision which is quite interesting to have a look at. So today we have a lot of gas, of course, gas supply, a big district heating system, more than 1,000 kilometers of district heating in the city, supplying 1/3 of the households in Vienna. And we have only a handful local heating networks. In the future, we see that the district heating will grow substantially, as well as maybe some local heating networks. And we want to get rid of the natural gas and maybe have some left renewable gas for high process heat purposes. So these were some insights now from the strategy. You can find the strategy online as well as the Vienna Climate Guide. And in this context today, of course, I also want to highlight that there is a very nice library of this Decarb Cities Pipes project, where all the publications run together. So you can have a look at examples from all the cities in the research project. The next part now is, as the headline says, I want to go into the implementation program. Phasing out gas is a complicated challenge. I've now presented to you the concept that you can see on the bottom here in this graph, where we showed the technical solutions, how to decarbonize the city from refurbishment activities via district heating or heat pump solutions. So in which building we need which solution. But behind that, of course, there are also essential parts that we have to look at, like the labor market, affordable housing. You should not forget that at all. The legal framework behind it, where we have substantial challenges today in Austria, the spatial energy planning, and also, of course, communication. And one thing is to write all the strategies and the technical solutions, but then we need to work together as a city. And that's why I want to show you the implementation program as just very simple. I've talked about the local working groups that we've had before. Right now, we are in this first stage of the phasing out gas implementation program. Here we want to create a broad data or knowledge base, basically. We are currently trying different versions and think about legal framework adaptations. We are doing spatial energy planning. We are focusing on subsidies. We are preparing the conversion of municipal buildings, because that's also something that cities need to do firsthand. We have a very interesting project called the 100 Projects Leaving Gas, showing innovative buildings, how it could be done, the phase out of gas. Also existing buildings, of course, they are phasing out gas. And we have the pioneering areas for district heating network. I will show you this also a little bit. And from 2026 onwards until 2040, we have the big rollout planned. This next slide, don't try to read it. It's just the organization of the city administration. It should just show you that it's complicated within a city as well. So in each city, it's complicated. My department is right here in the middle. It's the energy planning department. And we are not managing the whole phasing out gas program. This is managed by the executive office, the group of construction and technology. So this is one one unit of the city that is holding together all the departments. So this is just what I wanted to show you, that there are so many players even within the city organization itself, without also city-owned companies, so just the departments. It gets quite complicated, and but we have this chief executive office, which is quite helpful here in this context, of course, phasing out gas. And here is a slide of important departments, enterprises, and companies that are working together to phase out gas. We are preparing right now all the basics. For instance, on the left, you have my energy planning department, so where I work in. We have the heat provider, or the energy provider, Wien Energie, on board. We have Urban Innovation Vienna, of course, leading the Decap City Pipes project as well. So here we have also this innovative hub and organization included. But we also have in this program, like kindergartens, schools, all the different relevant departments in the city, or the grid operator. So you can have a look at this. This is all published in the phase out gas paper. And the implementation program itself, this is blurred out because it's an internal document. It's the work breakdown structure. It just shows the complexity of this situation of phasing out gas. These are all working groups and tasks that are running right now. One is, for instance, the spatial energy planning, where I'm part of, so one of this planning aspects. Then another one are these pioneering areas with district heating that we have. Then we have a legal group dealing with legal issues. We have a group dealing with innovative houses, projects, and yeah, it's quite complicated. Just should show you this. Within the implementation program, right now we have the main focus until 2025 highlighted here. So we are focusing right now a lot on district heating, and of course also on other renewable resources outside district heated areas, you could say. We have this initiating 100 gas-free residential building program and working group showing how it could be done and how it is actually done, and showing just building owners, if it worked already for 100 buildings, why can't I be the 101st one to continue? So it's quite interesting and a lot of learning in this part. And we are preparing the transition of the city-owned buildings. That's a challenge in itself, knowing all the buildings owned by the city. It's also not an easy task. And as Michael already said before, we have also quite tough challenges, because also regarding the legal framework in Austria on the federal level, like the phasing out gas is not there on a legal basis. So we hope that this would be there for existing building, but yeah, there's no time limit basically right now. So this is challenging. And of course, also the financing issue, because if you don't have a law restricting the use of gas until 2040, for instance, also the financing is kind of complex, because then it's challenging. For refurbishment and heat, for refurbishment and the heating system exchange, it is estimated in Vienna that we need more than 2.5 billion euros per year. And for the district heating expansion, around 6 or 7 billion euros until 2040. So these are quite heavy investments within one city alone. And of course, the labor market. This is always something that comes up to me when all the cities start working on that. We're running out of people, basically, working for it. And right now, I just want to give you some examples in the actual work. These are the pioneering areas, for instance, pioneering areas for district heating. This is where the energy provider is testing a big rollout of district heating in these areas, and all the learnings until 25 are gathered for the citywide rollout. Also, I have to say, not the entire city will be supplied with district heating, but of course, large amounts where other alternatives are lacking. And of course, energy zoning. This is what we've talked about before. These are the energy. This is the energy zoning existing already in these orange areas. you are not allowed anymore to use natural gas in new buildings. So this is an instrument that has been established and also needs further development to maybe someday we'll have it also for existing buildings. And finally, the last slide now about the heating plans. We are now currently working on putting this vision into a map together with the energy providers in Vienna to have also some planning security on that matter. So energy zoning, heating planning, however you want to call it, is a big issue as well in Vienna. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter, for the presentation. So if you have any question, please raise your hand. We have a few minutes for discussion, so don't hesitate. I think it's, yeah, you said it's quite complicated, but at least you have a plan and a direction, quite a number of issues already identified, and also quite interestingly, a governance structure. I mean, this high-level executive office for the out-of-gas strategy is a really important tool to bring all these people together and try to align them in the same direction. So at least it
was not
provides...
too. I hope it was not too complicated, the internal stuff, but I think it's always interesting to see how
yes,
a
for
city
sure.
works itself. Yeah.
And we are going to share with you also the support of the presentation, so you can have a closer look, let's say, with a bit more time. We have a question from Eric. Can you present yourself, please,
yes.
as well?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Eric Monami, and I work for EDORA, the Federation of Renewable Energy in the French-speaking part of Belgium. Thanks very much for your presentations. I was wondering if you could give us some more information on the financial requirements, unless, of course, this is already present in the documents that you mentioned and that I will look up, of course, on the internet. But if it's not there, then I'd be interested in having more details on that part.
Can you maybe precise a bit which kind of funding and what?
Yeah, well, I'm having it very specifically about the requirements. So Peter mentioned a budget of 2.5 billion euros per year in the beginning, and I don't know exactly what this covers. So either in terms of zoning or how you split up that budget between different types of costs. I mean, you need to open all the streets, I presume. You've got the piping costs. Does that include the heat sources, or is this just for the network? Those types of things. And I have in mind that there exists literature on the cost of deploying a network, and that amounts to roughly 1,000 euro per meter or something. But these are the kinds of costs that I'm alluding to.
I think Michael also wants to say something because he turned on his screen, but the district heat, the grid costs, for instance, they're in the cities, they are even more. So they are between 2,000 and 5,000, I would guess. And the billions that I mentioned for the expansion of the grid is only the cost for the expansion of the grid so far. And the refurbishment, yeah, in detail, I'm not entirely familiar with the financing part, and I think it's still an ongoing discussion where you want to go. But if you're, for example, funding from a city perspective, the expansion of the district heating, you also need a spatial area where you want to expand it. So this is also a requirement, basically, that we found out that you need certain areas where it's certain. If you go in advance, if you want to finance as a city the expansion of the district heating, for instance, you need to know where you're going, and you need to set limits. If you reach certain goals, then as an energy provider, you will get back the money, otherwise not. So it's a complicated matter. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
You want me to add something?
Yes, please.
Okay. As an economist, you have to divide between costs and finance and budget. So So the costs for the investment costs for decarbonizing Vienna are or were estimated just before the inflation at around about 50 billion euros until 2040. Now you have to put this into context. The Vienna gross regional product is 100 billion per year. So if you invest like 2 billion per year for 20 years, it would be about 2% of the gross GDP of Vienna. And these costs can be divided like this: about 30 billion for renovating and actually 30 billion for private houses. 2/3 of it, like 20 billion, for thermal insulation. This is the biggest part, and only 10 billion for exchanging the gas boilers through either heat pumps or district heating. It's the minor part. Another 10 billion for non-private buildings, like office buildings or public buildings. Same structure, mostly for thermal insulation, the smaller part for exchanging the heating system. And about 10 billion in investing into the infrastructure, not only in expanding the district heating system and decarbonizing the district heating at the same time, but also for expanding the electricity grid, because out of the plan was from the 600,000 gas boilers, 300,000 will go towards district heating in the inner part of the town, and 300,000 to heat pumps. So there is, of course, also an investment into the electricity grid necessary. So that's about roughly it. The 50 millions probably are more by now because of inflation, etc., everything. Now, about the financing, which part of it has to be financed by public budget is, of course, a point of discussion. You can subsidize everything, then this a big share of it would be relevant for a public budget. Or you can just order the people they have to and not subsidize it at all. In between that is a huge difference, what it actually means for a city government or the city budget. Of course, if there is more public financing, then there has to be less private financing by banks or whatever. But that's my take on how to approach this topic.
Thanks very much.
Yes, maybe one last question from Sandy.
And one more sentence. These 50 billions, of course, are not entirely additional costs, because there would be business as usual costs anyway. There is an exchange of gas boilers with new gas boilers now because we don't have the law. There is always a certain insulation rate anyway. So these are not the additional costs, but these are the overall costs. It is also important to say, I guess that probably more than half of it would be additional costs, but there is a substantial cost anyway. Every year, it's part of the GDP to have always renovations and exchange of heating systems, etc., etc. So, yeah. Sorry.
I just wanted to ask a very basic question. Do you have the legal? Do local authorities or the local authorities that are in the decarb pipe project, do they have the legal authority to actually ban gas? Okay, that explains a lot.
Some Swiss cantons and cities have. The rest of all the partners does not have. So Switzerland is the communist country to look for. The rest is not.
I think you have to edit that bit out of the video.
Well, we have done a votation, so a citizen consultation, which voted in the canton of Zurich to ban boilers. So it's a democratic decision about that. And you can find more information in the resources of the Decarb City Pipe project, which I'm going to quickly present now. So yeah, we have quite some useful resources produced by the project for other cities, but also stakeholders interested in this topic. I will name very few of them. First, some recommendation for a city heating and cooling supply and demand by 2050, where to use which technologies why green gas should not be used to heat a building, for instance. So quite a number of information here. Also, which kind of priority order for the use of the different renewable energy sources. All this, is explained in these deliverables. For the one willing to transform this outlook into a spatial plan, we have a guidance for cities developing heating and cooling plans. You can find the plans of the city directly on the project website, but also the transition roadmap and some of the instruments that Elisa and Peter presented. They are described in detail in this transition roadmap for each of the cities. And finally, as we said, not all cities have the legal mandate to enforce their transition roadmap, and we have produced a number of recommendations to improve regulatory framework at national but also EU level. With that, I want also to mention some events that could be interesting for you. Well, the Decop City Pipe project is ending at the end of this year. We don't have any more EU event plan, but other events organized by other projects. Quickly, I would like to mention on the 6th of December, we have a webinar on new European heating and cooling legislation. So if you want to have a broad overview of what's going to happen in the Fit for 55 package, which is going to impact local authorities on the question of heating and cooling, you can join us. And in February, the SHAPE project, which is about district level innovative social housing renovation project, is going to have its final conference in Brussels on the 21st February, and there will be a study visit on the 22nd February. If you want to receive more information about event and news on this project, Energy Cities have a hub specifically on the question of fossil-free cities, and you can subscribe to our monthly newsletter to get relevant information about event and resources. So you can join us for that. With that, I think we are at the end of our webinar. I would like to thank very much our speaker, Elisa and Peter. Thanks a lot. And thank you everybody to join today. We'll send you the materials very soon. I wish you a very good day.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yes, thanks a lot. Have a good day. Bye.